Give us one more just because we haven't heard it in a while.
Here we go! Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another outstanding, immaculate, exceptionally great episode of Jofo in the Ring. I am your host, the Harbinger of Truth, Black Dynamite, Jeremy Prophet. So proud to be bringing you another outstanding guest here. Someone that I grew up watching. Someone who's performed in WCW, who's performed in the WWE, who has been a great supporter and developer of this generation of talent that we see right now performing week in, week out on television, someone who's contributed a lot to the business, and I look forward to delving deep into their career in these next couple of moments. I give you a man who was known as the Laughing Man in WCW, was known as General Erection, was known by his own name as well, the one and only Bill DeMott. Bill, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremy, thanks, man. Great. That's it. After that introduction, that's it. We're good. Everything else is easy after that.
Yeah, we popped the people with the entrance, and now everything's downhill.
you had him at General Erection, and then it went all downhill from there.
I love General Erection, actually. I personally think the Misfits in action were very underrated. People can say what they will about late WCW and, not being at the height of the NWO and all that. But, I mean, I loved the New Blood storyline. I loved you guys with the Misfits in action. I thought that was great. I loved it.
The probably the most fun I had in my whole career was during that time with the Misfits and running around with Canada's favorite son, Lance Storm. Was probably my favorite time in my whole career.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And as a fan watching on the other side, I mean, I hadn't gotten into the business yet, but I love that. I mean, I watched WCW. I think I first discovered it. They started showing it up here in Canada in like 90, 95 on like our local TV. They were showing just bits and pieces, like a watered down version of Nitro. Then they were showing worldwide. So we started getting exposed to it a bit more, but I love WCW. I mean, I tell anyone I know, like I was more of a WCW guy than a WWE guy. Maybe not the popular thing to say today, but love WCW. To me, it never lost my viewership, right to the dying day. I love WCW, and I watched religiously week in, week out, Nitro, Thunder, all of it that I could find. Loved it. And you were a big part of that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good time. Now you hear, sometimes you hear some of the younger generation, oh, that WCW, but if you were in it, besides all the nonsense that is talked and how the business was getting ruined and all this and that, we're about to be sold every 2 days and all that stuff. In between all those lines, it was a blast, man. And it was a pleasure. The talent pool was insane. And we just had a good time. I mean, that was the whole thing about it, was if you can still have fun during all that stuff that was going on, then it was all worth it. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those WCW days.
Well, let me ask you, and talking about WCW, and usually I like to do these things chronologically, talk about your beginnings in the business, but for me, the fan in me is kind of coming out here because I love WCW.
Cool.
For the guys in the locker room, all that, bureaucracy and political stuff of, is the company going to get sold, or who's booking the show this week? Did that trickle down to you guys too, and the uncertainty, or was it just, business as usual? I'm here to wrestle and do my job.
Well, we all knew. I mean, even if you weren't part of the, the politics and behind the scenes, and you weren't on the booking committee and all that stuff, you knew. I mean, they came out and said, we don't want WCW here. So when Turner was selling and AOL came in and Coke came in and this one came in, everybody was saying across the board, we don't want wrestling. So we knew that it was going to happen. But, the end of the day, I mean, we could talk about 1,000,002 things, but the camaraderie was still good amongst I think the majority of the backstage crew and everything like that. And it was a fun time to keep going, because if that stuff wasn't happening, there's a lot of guys who never would have got the chance to be on TV. So the new blood and all these things that were happening, because people said, well, this thing's sinking anyway. Well, let's just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Thank goodness, because a lot of people got a lot of a lot of traction out of that, and got to showcase who they were, as talent, men and women. So I thought it was a good time. I mean, the politics of it. Here's the downfall of my whole career. I'm not a politics guy. I don't do it well. I never did. I didn't play it for the push. A lot of people have told me over the years, if I would have just been smarter and played the game backstage, things would have went differently. But I didn't see it that way. But for me, WCW was an awesome time, and it sucked every day trying to figure out if you had a job. Was this going to be the last day? But at the end, we did work, and there was a lot of good work being put out then, even to the last day.
Yeah. Now you see, I'm kind of a guy like you because, I've been doing this 17 years, obviously, never made it as far as you did, or haven't made it that far yet because, there's still a lot of gas in the tank. But yet, exactly. But I'm the same way. I'm not a politician. I've always been I come to work, I put my head down, I do the job that's asked of me, and I want to do it better than anybody around me. And I really feel that the cream rises to the top. If you're good at what you do, it won't go unnoticed. Unfortunately, in the subjective world of professional wrestling, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and you don't know who's putting the screws to you. But I ask you this like this, looking back on it, would you have done things differently when it comes to your in-ring career at that time?
No, because I got into it for the same reasons I stayed into it. I enjoyed the task. I never thought I was going to make a living at it. I never thought I was going to, I never was a great negotiator of contracts and all this stuff. If someone came up to me and said, "This is what we want to do," and shook my hand, then I was in. But looking back on it now, because I really feel like we all become smarter once we step away and we see how things are going. You get a deep breath and really see it with a different set of eyes. I wouldn't have changed a thing. I would have handled my career the same way, up and down. I probably would have been a little bit less reckless at times in and out of the ring, if you know what I mean. As I got older, I could appreciate the things that, you hear the horror stories, and they're out there, they're true. But I think as far as my in-ring career and my character and stuff like that, I wouldn't change a thing. And again, I'd probably have people telling me, "You need to do this, you need to do that," and I just stick to what I knew and what I did at least fairly well, and hopefully have another good run at it. But I was happy with the way things went.
Okay, good. No, good to hear. And so in doing my research for this, I saw that you're from New Jersey. So being from Jersey, I guess you don't get the luxury to pump your own gas, but you get to cheer for the Devils. So all's well that ends well.
The gas thing is still a little wonky. So it's funny when I get to go up there, now being in Florida, and I try to visit as much as I can, and it's just so weird to sit there and not be able to take care of your own vehicle, but it's all good.
Yeah, I always found that strange about Jersey.
It's very strange.
But I mean, given your age and all, I imagine growing up in Jersey at that time, that had to make you tough. That had to make you, able to handle yourself.
I didn't grow up in a tough atmosphere or anything like that. You were just as an athlete though, back, playing football and wrestling and track and all the things that we did, you just do what was expected. And that mindset of being an athlete, helped me when I went to Johnny Rod's in Brooklyn and things like that. And then you quickly learn in this business, as no matter what your preconceived notion of the business is, it's who's in front of you that day and what they're talking about and how are you going to handle that situation. So, and I think even at you're at 17 years and I'm at like years, and there's still someone who could come out and say, "No, we want to do it this way." You have to figure out if this is what you want to do, is that what you're going to do? But you had to have thick skin. I think tougher than guy tough, like fighting tough. You had to develop that thick rhino skin and not take this business personally. That's just me,
Yeah, and it sounds like that's like a mental toughness that you're referring to.
Yeah, you have to have that inner thing that wants you, because your body doesn't want to get up every day and do that. You don't want to train for it. You don't even want to go to the gym. So you have to have that thing inside of you that bypasses all the normalcy of life and tells you, nope, you need a break and all these things. And you have to have that mental toughness, that internal, that internal fortitude, that thing, because it's sports entertainment or pro wrestling. And you've seen the changes over the years since you've been in it. Mm-hmm. It takes its toll on you mentally, physically, emotionally, so you have to be tough in certain ways. The key is to not be tough 24 hours a day, because then you make yourself, lack of a better term, batshit crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's something that gets spoken about a lot and that I've seen, and maybe it's just because of the years I've been in the business that I kind of got to see a bit of the change and, the influence of social media and, how it's become a lot easier to get into the professional wrestling business. And, maybe I'm someone who benefited from that, but at the same time, I mean, I see some of my contemporaries and I see people that if they were around in your generation, they probably wouldn't have survived. The business would have chewed them up, spat them out in short order. But I personally feel that it's a lot easier to get into wrestling now, and not enough people, have to pay their dues as much. What are your thoughts on now versus back then?
Yeah, I think and I think it all happened, a lot of people put it to this era or that era, but the minute it became sports entertainment, I mean, because becoming a professional wrestler was harder than getting into the NFL. I mean, you have people coming from all over the world training to do this, and at the time, 1 or 2 places to go, and the territories were gone and weeding out and all that. But now social media, somebody who can talk is going to get a look. A bodybuilder is going to get a look if they have the slight. Logan Paul's the perfect example. Social media plays a big part, and it's a lot easier to get into sports entertainment. I still believe in my heart it's super hard to become a professional wrestler, but to get into sports entertainment, I think right now is probably the easiest path there's ever been. Mm-hmm. And it's because of social media and all the YouTube and all the things that are out there.
Yep, and we'll touch on it a little bit later in this interview. I do want to kind of go back to that. But now going back to your generation and your path, one of my good friends, very dear friend, Carl Ouellet, has spoken extremely highly of you to me. He tells me you guys were a tag team back in the day.
Yes, yes. So. Bash and Crash. and first of all, I hear his name, I smile, because I'm absolutely love that man. And to watch his transformation into, what he's doing now as PCO and just really how he reinvented himself again and the things he's able to do still at, he's got to be in his late 30s by now. And I say that with a little giggle. But Carl and I spent a lot of time together in Japan. It was really cool to see another, because he's a big guy. Mm-hmm. And you had 2 big guys that weren't afraid to do things that the Mexican cats were doing. So, when they put us together, and he came off with the leg drop followed by the moonsault, and we just ran roughshod there for a little while, and I had such a blast with him. But even watching him, I was a fan of his with the Quebecers, and when they came to back into WCW, when we came together again when he was working there, and everything he's done. That guy is a not only a true pro, but a gentleman's gentleman. And talk about tough SOBs. He's just if people don't like, there's a lot of people, they say, who's some of the toughest guys in the business? Carl's there. And I'm just a big fan of his. He makes me smile when I hear his name, and I'm super, super proud of what he's doing. I wish I could wake up like he does and say, I'm going to go do this today. But those days are over for me. But I live vicariously through him and Gangrel now.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. And I mean, hey, it's the wrestling business. Never say never. It's
never say never.
Maybe you guys are due for a reunion.
I'll tell you, he's a super good guy. We had a lot of fun early on, and we were in Japan, and not that it's not as physical now, it's a little more westernized, but we were there when it was, it was banging time, and you went out every night, and you went at it strong. And Carl's just a super, super, super good guy in and out of the ring.
Yeah, I've done a couple of these interviews, and I hear that a lot, and it's hard for me to understand because you can watch footage, but you don't know what's really going on in there. And when a guy's a good worker, it's hard to gauge what's real and what's even more real. But
super, super good guy.
Yeah, I was just saying with Japan because I spoke to Fred Ottman, to Tugboat about it, and I spoke to a few different guys, and they said they went over there, and it's like those guys they want to test you. Where does that stem from?
The first thing I was told when I knew I was my first tour ever, I was still in Puerto Rico, and Ted Petty, Rocco Rock, before he became Rocco Rock, Teddy and I go that far back, and Teddy said to me, he goes, "You hit them before they hit you because they're going to want to see who you are." I was like, "What?" He goes, "You hit them first." And I when we landed the first time in Tokyo, my mindset was, whoever I'm physical with is going to know I'm in the ring. And that was still the way it was back in the early 90s. It was 90, 91, 90, 92, 93, 94, that kind of time. And especially if you were a bigger, I was a big gaijin. So you come in and you can't look a certain way and then not be physical. So it was, I was just told from the jump, that's how they treated you. So I came out of the chute, figured, let me treat them that way before I have to learn the lesson the hard way.
Yeah.
But I loved my time in Japan. I always thought I'd retire there.
Oh, wow. So, no, it definitely sounds, I've heard nothing but good things about Japan. I do hope to get over there one day. But yeah, it's a different mentality. And I think it still kind of is. Probably nothing like in your day, but I think it's definitely something everyone should experience.
Yeah.
Now take me from Japan to, if I'm not mistaken, you had a tryout with the WWF before WCW had signed you.
Yeah, I had two. One, I don't know where it came from, how I got it. I'm pretty sure maybe Johnny Rods had something to do with that. And then Jerry Jarrett had called me in when Jerry was the number 2 guy under Vince. And I had my tryout with the WWF early on in my career. Thank goodness it didn't work out because I was not ready for that. I was still learning, and I was traveling, but I was still learning the game and how to be a bigger guy and still how to do things the right way. But I had a great loop with them, and then what came out of it was nothing because at the end of that trip, at the end of that circuit they had, Jerry left the company. So when Jerry Jarrett left, so did all the guys that, came with him. So I probably didn't make enough of an impression then for people to go, hey, what happened to Jerry's guy? So, I went back to Japan after that. But yeah, I had, there was 2 different times. I wish I could remember how I got in there the other time. But yeah, Jerry Jarrett had brought me in. I had the same tryout series as Duke the Dumpster, and he got hired and I didn't. So I went back to Japan.
Okay. Well, it obviously worked out for the best because you had a hell of a career there in WCW.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Who set up WCW for? How'd that come about?
Sullivan.
Okay.
Worst wrestling story in the world. I met Kevin over the years of being in Japan, and Kevin come and do a couple tours a year over there. And one day he called me, and word for word, he asked me if I was still fat and if I was still wrestling. And I answered yes to both. And he told me to be in Macon, Georgia the next day.
Wow. And
how I got that opportunity was Vader and Orndorff got into that legendary brawl backstage.
Yep.
And Vader was out of the company, and they needed a big body that could bump and move for Hogan and the big baby faces. So I flew down to Macon, Georgia, shook Hogan's hand, Bischoff's hand, and Sullivan's hand, and I started with WCW in 1995.
So that was just on a day's notice. They brought you.
The day before, he called B. There'll be a ticket waiting for you. Fly into Atlanta and drive to Macon, Georgia. And me being me, and I told you earlier, I never questioned it. I'm like, oh, okay. So if I went to the airport and the ticket was there, good. I went, and there it was. The ticket was there, and I had a rental car ready, and I drove to Macon, Georgia. I met Hogan, Bischoff, and Sullivan in the shower of the Macon Coliseum. They laid out their plans. They said they're looking forward to seeing me, grow in the company. And here's what they wanted to sign me to. And I shook 3 hands and I watched the show, got on a plane, and flew back home to New Jersey.
Wow. No, that's amazing. It's an amazing story. So
Just
you
the right place at the right time.
So you were essentially brought in to fill Vader's spot.
I don't know if anybody could fill Vader's spot, but I think it was that spot of big guys that could move and that could bump and feed for Hogan and Savage and Sting and the guys that, because now Luger was coming in and right at that time and all these guys. So I was and Kevin knew what I was capable of doing, and there would never be any questions asked. It'd just be, hey, this is what you're doing. Okay, cool. Yeah. And so how can you go wrong coming into a company in my first 6 months on live events and Saturday main events and stuff was against Randy Savage? I mean, how do you go wrong there? So
yeah, no, that's amazing. And the more I think about it, but the parallels between you and Vader, I mean, like you said, you're both big guys. You're both work real snug. You both got the moonsault, which I wanted to ask you. Is one of my questions I planned to ask. How did you come up with the moonsault?
A bunch of guys at a pool on a day off in Puerto Rico, jumping around the pool like a bunch of schoolboys, and everybody just trying to outdo each other. So it was just a simple backflip off the side of the pool. But when I got to Japan, Sullivan said, "You do the backflip tonight. You and Pogo are going to take the championships. You're going to become tag team." I'm like, I've never done that. Because I didn't ask you if you've ever done it. He goes, "That's what you're doing." And he told me if I didn't do it, I'd never work in Japan again. So I went to the top rope, closed my eyes, and jumped upside down. And 30 years later, that became my signature thing. But watching Muta do it was awesome, because Muta, although he's a deceptively big guy, he wasn't the size of a Bigelow or a Vader or somebody like that. So I always saw Scotty Bigelow kind of did it a little bit sideways, and Vader kind of went a little bit sideways. Now, how do I differentiate myself from those big men? Because those are 2 legendary big men in wrestling. So what could I do? So I said, okay, let me learn this stuff. And so I figured out that moonsault real quick and rode it all the way to retirement.
Yep. And that was no laughing matter.
No laughing matter.
See what I did there?
That's for sure. If you were looking at it, I was like, oh crap.
Yeah, I wanted to sneak that one in there at some point. But so you got started in WCW with the Dungeon of Doom. I'm guessing Kevin Sullivan came up with the idea for the Laughing Man, having you in the Dungeon of Doom.
Yeah.
Yep. So he had your back right from the start.
Well, I came in as the man of question because they weren't sure what they were going to do with me. And then they brought me into the dungeon tapings when they were doing all the vignettes. Yep. And that's when they said, okay, Big John Tenta, and there was One Man Gang and Ming and Barb and Boss Man and She's a Lou, the Big Show, and all these gigantic people. And it was still the running joke was who can get to the ring first and take the first chair shot. So it was always let Hugh go first. Hugh will get there first, and I became the punch dummy for the Dungeon of Doom.
That was right when I started watching like that. If I could even just pinpoint the week, I think it was maybe the week where they first showed Curtis Iakea there, the playing Kevin's father. I think they had that dark vignette with him on the throne. Yes. That was, I think, the first time WCW aired here, or at least I saw it on the air. And, that hooked me in. And then I watched the pay-per-view where they had the Alliance to End Hulkamania with along with the Horsemen and the Dungeon of Doom.
Yeah.
And I was watching that, week after week. Hogan and Savage went through the cage there. Man, it's bringing back a lot of memories for me.
It didn't suck to start in 95 there. I was coming in right at the very beginning of all the upswing that would take over that Attitude Era.
Yeah.
Time in WCW. And like I always say, how can you go wrong? You're running with Hogan and Savage and Sting and the Horsemen and all these things. And I'm going, 6 months ago I was in Japan and Mexico and Puerto Rico, and now I'm banging with the big boys, and it was just, to me, it was just a blast every time. So,
and so how did things change when the NWO became a thing? Because then you have the WCW baby faces, you got the heels in WCW, but then you got NWO, who are like the heels that are on top of everybody here. They're the main driving force. They're like they're the antagonists, but they're kind of becoming the lead characters in the show because everything's becoming NWO. What's that like for a guy like you who's on the heel side of the equation, but not NWO?
You sat back and waited to see what came out of it, because don't forget, NWO got so big so fast that then all of a sudden there was 3 different versions of the NWO. Then there was the MWO, and then there was Red and Black, and then there was all these things. And so everybody started to become part of the NWO, but you still needed guys, you still needed characters to go against. Yeah. So it was a lot of I know a lot of guys got frustrated with it, but I looked at it as opportunities, because a lot of those guys only worked 40 days a year. And, we're on the road 300. So that gave me 260 plus days a year to go wrestle, and back then 25-minute matches on live events and stuff like that. So I enjoyed it and took the opportunity. And then when the chances came, going in, like when the MIA was there right during the NWO, and Hogan had his thing with Bischoff, and then now he was a rebel, and everybody was becoming rebels. And next thing I know, I'm standing in the ring side by side with DDP and Hogan, as with some of the biggest baby faces in the industry. And I'm going, well, okay, let's just keep seeing where it winds up. But that NWO thing took everybody by storm, and then everybody forgot who they were, and they wanted to become part of the NWO.
Well, I mean, the NWO, it did help to elevate a couple of guys, but I think that, there were also a lot of guys who were part of the NWO but are very forgettable. It didn't really do anything to elevate Virgil. It didn't really do much to elevate, IRS was part of it.
It didn't help Horace Hogan. It didn't help
Scott Norton.
I don't think it helped Scott Norton. No. I don't think it helped, a lot of the guys. Big Brian, it didn't help a lot of them, but they were like, okay. It didn't help Kurt Hennig. It didn't help, any of the guys. A lot of the guys that went in, but that was the thing, and they were running it. And okay, let's make NWO black and red, and the Wolf Pack, and the Mexican World Order became a thing, and everybody was. So the guys that now stood out were the guys who weren't part of all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I said, as someone like me who was a fan who watched everything, like I was watching Saturday Night, I was watching Worldwide, I'd see you on there, every week doing your thing with the First Family, with you, Barbarian, Flynn. My my WCW knowledge is very, very intact.
You're on it. But a lot of those guys, it's funny because until Nitro kicked off, and then they made Thunder because the roster was bigger. Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted to be part of Thunder. I don't want to work on Thursday nights until Thunder's ratings started getting really high. And then the guys who only worked only on Monday nights, now they wanted to work Thursday nights. Yeah. So what do we do with the guys who work Thursday nights? Because now we're getting bumped out of that. So we went to Monday nights. And then, it was always the same guys. A lot of people said, oh, Saturday night's always the same guys, girls, wrestling. Yeah, because no one else wanted to do it. Mm. So anytime there was a show or any matches there were, you saw the handful of guys that wanted to go out there and just bang and have fun and do their thing. So there was always room to do it. But that was the thing. As success followed it, they kept pushing everybody, and we kept pushing each other in a circle. So guys who wanted Mondays didn't want Mondays anymore because the higher ratings were on Thursday. Well, then take us and now move us to Monday night until that one kicked off. And, so it was a vicious circle.
Yeah, and that's a great segue that you gave me there because of that, you ended up getting what is looked back on as a great opportunity and a great moment in getting to be the first opponent for Bill Goldberg, which happened on a Nitro. Yeah,
and that came early on too, especially with Bill. I mean, nobody, and it's been said and documented, and everybody's saying, this, that, and the other, but no one knew what Bill was going to do on night one. No one knew what it was going to turn into. I think, and I've always said they weren't sure. I think the original thought was don't say his name because we're not sure where we're going to go with this. but they said his name Goldberg at the end of it, and they brought him in. And if you remember, he didn't say anything on the interview segment. He just walked off. But I don't think anybody ever knew it was going to blow up that way and become a streak and all those things. But like I always say, I'm kind of known for a few things. That being probably one of the biggest is being Bill's, first opponent. So I hang my hat on that very proudly and go, that's freaking cool. 30 years later, they're doing a documentary. They're still talking about Bill's first match. So
yep.
Pretty cool.
And it was a really good match. I mean, you had him, you hit him with the moonsault there. You had him get out of it. When you're putting that together with Bill, and obviously this is his debut. Were you given any marching orders like, okay, you got to make this guy look like $1 million, or was this just
That's it.
Yep.
That was it. Hey, they like this guy. You're here for a reason. This ain't about you. Put your bumping shoes on and let's see what happens. But I agree. I thought it was a good match. Mm-hmm. That probably was one of the longer matches he had during the streak when it started. But just the whole, I don't remember that well a lot of conversation. The only two things I remember is letting him know that where I put him for the moonsault, stay there, don't move. The rest is on him. And the other thing was we were talking about because he wanted to do that backflip, mm-hmm. that back handstand thing. And everybody was telling him, don't do that. But it was in his mind. He was going to do it. So when he did it, it still sticks in my mind today going, but it all worked out. So there wasn't a lot of long conversation. There was no rehearsals. We didn't sit and talk to each other a bunch before them because Bill was still training and learning and stuff. And I'm not sure if Bill knew what he was supposed to do that night either. Mm-hmm. I mean, they told him, here it is. We got the game plan and I think we executed it well. And the rest is, freaking guy. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason.
Yep. I think he did. He was the right person. I think he was what WCW needed at that time. They needed that homegrown star because, they had been saturating it with a lot of the guys that had come over from the WWF. And now here was someone they built from the ground up that I actually heard a great quote from Jim Ross where he said, he was their Hogan, like what Hogan was to the WWF. And that's how he should have been used. I mean, we can argue about how his streak was ended and those kinds of things. But I definitely think that he was the most successful homegrown talent from WCW and the right guy at the right place, the right time.
Agreed.
You did a great service to give him that kind of a debut to start him off, real strong. I know Meng worked with him too, made him look good. Glacier had a lot of good matches with him as well. Those ones really stick out in my mind. Then there's the one with William Regal, with Steve Regal. That a lot of people are kind of outspoken about as to what happened there. Do you have any insight as to what happened that night with that match with Steve Regal and Goldberg?
No, I remember watching it, and I remember listening to something not too long ago about Regal talking about it. And even after he talked about it, I watched it again, and I still didn't see, I think everybody gets to look back on it and form an opinion. But it's one of those things, and I think Regal was being the veteran. I think he was protecting himself as well, not to just look like, someone who was in there to be thrown around or something like that. And I think it did Bill a good service by it not being that kind of walking in and out kind of match. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And talk about tough guys, and they don't all shapes and forms. Regal is one who lets you know he was in the ring and he was going to do his job, but not at the expense of making himself look less than, Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people get to talk about it because it was part of Goldberg's streak. And it wasn't, I think a lot of people said that Bill didn't look as strong as he should have. And maybe Regal, didn't want to do business, but I think he did great business. And I just don't look at matches that way. I just don't, well, why do you do this? Like if everybody enjoyed the match, that's between the two guys after, in my opinion. And as long as the booker's happy with it, stuff. Mm-hmm. But I really don't have an opinion about the match. I think Bill learned as he earned. Mm-hmm. And I've heard him say that and I go on record as saying, I think so highly of Bill as a person, a father, an athlete, and then a wrestler. And I think of him as a wrestler last because I had a chance to get to know him and, get to see who he was. So I just don't look at the matches like that. We all have matches where it looked like a fight or it was a struggle or things. Oh, this is not copacetic and these guys aren't on the same page and there must be big heat and all that stuff. Instead of just looking at it as what it was a match and it did what it was supposed to do. And excuse me. And I feel like if we're still talking about it 25 years, 30 years later, it's a good match.
Yeah. And I know we'll put Goldberg aside for a bit, but the last thing I did want to say, because it does touch on him, is the end of the streak, where, they have the match with him and Kevin Nash and all the shenanigans that go into it, the run-ins, the cattle prod, all of those things. A lot of people very outspoken about it. I have my opinions about it. What are your thoughts on it as a guy who's there working the undercards and seeing Goldberg on top and seeing the streak come to an end like that? Give me your thoughts on that.
And it goes back to what we said earlier. Looking back on it now, at the time I was like, what the hell? Looking back on it now, I still say what the hell, but it was the powers that be. It was what they convinced everybody in that room that this was the right thing to do, and everybody do their job. And I think for all the buildup and everything that happened, I thought it sucked for it to end that way. I thought it was less, I don't know, the effect wasn't, I think it kind of diminished it a little bit. But at the end of the day, after that night, it wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? I think there could have been a creative way. There was a lot of smart people in that company that I think could have came up with a better way to end the streak or get that across. But they had the reins, and this was the way they wanted to do it, and they felt like it was the right way. And this goes back to our conversation. I'm not politically correct. I can't. I wish I could sit here and go, I'll tell you what's wrong with this, and I can't, because it didn't affect me. And I think that's the thing that kept me around for so long, is I stayed out of the things that didn't affect me. Mm-hmm. But as far as wrestling, it still did its job. I mean, it still had people talking. I just, as a fan of that streak and being a part of it from start to finish, I would have liked to seen it change. But clearly it didn't hurt Bill or Big Kev or anybody else. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that, and I don't get to talk about a lot of people with this. I don't get a lot of, the ex-WCW guys on here. Maybe we should reach out to more of them, because, I love WCW. And I just think that, for me, it's not so much the person who ended it, because I think Kevin at the time was at his most over. I think the Wolfpack, right. I remember, we were, my baseball team, we were all wearing Wolfpack shirts under our jerseys and stuff. It was over. It was like maybe one of the most over things, maybe as over as Goldberg at the time. And I don't think Kevin was the wrong guy. I just think that the way it all came about, that it was so convoluted, that it easily could have thought of something better. And then following it up with the finger poke shenanigans the night after, I just think that was the coup de grace that,
Well, that gives you the whole layout of how things really were going. I mean, it was a struggle, man. It was a struggle for a lot of guys to come in every day, and a lot of guys, and I say this respectfully, but there was a lot of guys in the back who weren't on that level, that were caught up in that stuff and voicing opinions and stuff that I believe hurt them in the long run as well. Yeah. Because it didn't affect you. You may have an opinion on it, but keep it to yourself and don't get in the middle of this. Like, none of those circles were my circles. So I just stayed the hell out of it. I mean, I'm sure I would have had a different opinion if I was in the storylines or something like that. But I think Kevin was the right guy. But I think you used the right word. It was just convoluted. There was too much of this, and that. And then followed up the next night with the finger poke. And so it kind of made everything wonky. It kind of. But that was the tone of what was going on behind the scenes. That was the tone. Russo cutting that promo and all that other stuff, and that was the tone, because every week, every month, we had a different boss. There was a new booker. There was a new head of this, and one guy left, the other guy came back. That guy left, the other guy came back. So it was a 3-man booth between Sullivan, Russo, and Bischoff for so long that the in-betweens was everybody's like, screw it, I'm doing what they want. What are they going to do, fire me?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I can imagine having the different bosses, having their talent that they want to showcase and not being able to do it. A lot of start, stop. I've read a lot of material on WCW. They had that book that came out, The Death of WCW. It really sticks in my craw that WCW is not around anymore. It should have still been around to this day. But
I thought we had a shot on the invasion. I really thought we had a shot at doing something new and revive it, but that fell short.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in a bit, but I wanted to kind of keep it chronological with you were a guy who you were grinding, you were hustling there. You were on Saturday night, you were on the B shows, Thunder, doing good work. And I feel that when they started the angle, with the new blood and everything, that was when they started to finally invest in you as a solo character that led to the Misfits in action. I really enjoyed everything about that group. I love the names. I love the military motif. I think that everyone in that group, even Van Hammer, I think that everyone in that group, they brought something original to the table. Man, just so many good memories. Whose idea was it to form the Misfits in action and that storyline? Where'd that come from?
That was Russo, and I want to say it was Eric first, because Eric pretty much told us, because I wasn't part of the new blood. It was the Kidmans, the Vampiros, so I was not figured into any of that stuff. And neither was Chavo. Lash was still a youngster. He was just signed his contract not too long before then. Hammer'd been around there for however many years and stuff. But Bischoff really told you guys are a bunch of misfits. We really have nothing for you. And then we had a sit down with Russo, and Jerry Only and the Misfits were there with Vampiro, so the Misfits, the legitimate Misfits, the group,
band,
were there. So what could we do? Well, we became MIA. And we did all. Last Chavo and I were the catalyst to that. He called us Misfits. So what could we do? What could we do? Misfits in action, MIA. So we designed all the shirts and gear. That was us. That was our money. The company didn't invest a dime in it. So we went out, got the shirts printed. We wore the shirts. We put MIA. I made the shirts that said FUBAR, which stood for FU, Bischoff, and Russo. And so we had those shirts, and we started making them and giving them out to people. So the Misfits was thrown together because we got nothing to do with them. And at the time, Booker wasn't quite going yet. And so Booker had this, and going back to Russo, and Booker started, one of his original characters was G.I. Bro. So G.I. Bro was the leader of the Misfits in action. Yep. So Booker was G.I. Bro, and I was captain, and everybody got their names. And then when Booker was ready to go off and do his thing, I promoted myself to general, and I made myself a 5-star general, and we just kicked it off from there, man. And they just let us have fun. They let us come up with a lot of the backstage vignettes and the promos, and we were finally being ourselves. So, our names were changed, but people who were WCW fans knew who the characters were. But then it got to be, who we were. So when we named each other, it was part of, Corporal Cajun, because Lash LaRue's a freaking Cajun. That's just the, Lieutenant Loco, because Chavo Guerrero's a maniac. Sergeant Stash, or Private Stash, we called Hammer because he never shared anything. And one of the funny stories ever was when Tylene Buck joined us as Major Guns, and Van Hammer had a fit because he wanted to know, he's been in the business 12 years, and how's this chick that nobody knows, how is she a major and he's a private? And these are the conversations I'm having in the back every night, going, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we're on TV. We're getting what do you care about what your rank is in this thing? Yeah.
So that's why he became a sergeant instead of a private.
Fun. He didn't want to be a private, and the girl who knew nothing, why was she a major? Well, Van Hammer lasted a little bit, not much longer, and then inserted Jerry Wall, who became AWOL.
Yeah. which is also a very creative name, the Sergeant AWOL.
Tremendous.
Yeah, no, it was a great group, brought me a lot of great memories. And I think having Booker at the time too, because he was on a rise there even before, and became a flagship player in WCW. Having Booker there with you, it was great.
Yeah. We got, I always say I got the rub off of Booker because people respected Booker, and they had they saw the future and what they wanted to do, and Booker had an agenda. And so I got the draft off of that. And then when Booker made his move, I made my move.
Yep. And then you'd go on to capture the United States Championship as well. Yeah. It was a great story, very entertaining. Even if I'm not mistaken, Chavo became Cruiserweight champion when he was Lieutenant Loco. He had a good rivalry there. I'm forgetting who it was with. I'm thinking it was maybe Prince Iaukea at the time, maybe. Might have been.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah,
that's good. Hey man, you got a great memory.
It's somehow I've avoided concussions all these years, believe it or not. I've actually never gotten injured in 17 years, but knock on wood. Yeah. But no, I love WCW. I just did. All the kids at school when it started going down in the ratings, they were all about Austin and Rock and all that. It's like, no, I still loved WCW, even if it was the Misfits in Action, even if it was the Natural Born Thrillers, even if it was the Filthy Animals.
Well, what a great time we got to running with the Filthy Animals. Mm-hmm. It was just a bunch of guys going, let's have at it again tonight. And like I said, so I had the Filthy Animals and all these other things, and then I got to break off and dance with Lance for that whole year and a half, or whatever it was, and it was just amazing. It was a highlight of my career.
Yeah, it was a great storyline with Lance when he had made the U.S. title into the Canadian title. Yeah. And I particularly liked, and I think you had a lot of involvement in this, the heel turn of Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Yeah.
That was, again, I don't know who the brain was behind that storyline, but the idea of, I think they were going to burn the flag, or he had to renounce his American citizenship. Yeah. That was some high stakes. And then when it happened and they were going to burn the flag and everything, it was, man.
When he came to TV the next day, clean shaved and with a haircut, he was instantly pissed off. Because he knew when he did it that he made a mistake. Wow. Because it was short-lived, that thing. And he knew, but they, it was that wrestling thing. They swore up and down, this is going to revitalize them, and this is going to be the thing. And I remember when he walked in, everybody went, and he was pissed because he knew it. He knew from the jump that it was a short-lived deal, and he just changed. Another Hall of Famer. You say Hacksaw Jim Duggan, everybody in the world knows who he is. Yep. And he walked in that day clean shaven in a Canada tracksuit with short hair, and gosh damn it, that was funny.
But I love that, maybe this was Russo in the writing or whoever it was that did that swerve because he lost the match. Now Jim was kind of, to me, a bit of a relic, but they always found ways to keep him reinventing himself, like when he was the janitor. I loved when he was the janitor. Yeah, that was a great storyline, and it was clever, and I really, really enjoyed it. But then he had the whole thing with Canada, and he has to renounce, or they're going to burn the flag or whatever it was, and he says, "Oh, well, I lied," and he starts fighting back, and it's this great pop. And then I think the heel turn was right after that. And I think that's why it really caught people off guard. Do you know whose idea that whole storyline was, and involving you?
I think that was all Russo.
Wow.
I think it was all Russo. All I know is it was when you didn't want to be around him, because when he started swinging that 2x4 again, he wasn't kidding. Huh.
Now you mentioned Russo. Russo is I've said this many times in episodes. I like Vince Russo. I think without Vince Russo, the business doesn't get to where it needs to be fast enough. He helped push that in that direction with the Attitude Era, with the WWF. But Russo is I kind of say he's like a home run hitter in baseball. Some of the guys who have the most home runs also have the most strikeouts. Right. And they get appraised by their home runs and not by their failures. I think Russo is kind of the opposite, where unfortunately people look at his failures and weigh that more in the balance than the good things that he did. So I've kind of been a Vince Russo apologist, advocate, lobbyist, maybe. But what are your thoughts objectively on Russo and the work he did?
I think excuse me, and I get along famously with Vince Russo. I think he'd take him at face value. He came in and he was the buildup was he was the savior of the business when he first came, and he was the guy who did all this stuff, and the Attitude Era started kicking it off and turned everything. So everybody was all behind him, and everybody, I mean, the line the day him and Ed Ferrara walked in and I think we're in Philadelphia, the line in catering and then to the office of people wanting to make sure he knew who they were, and here's a pitch and all that stuff. And then you had a couple of, jabronis like me. I was in catering and I went and waited for my, spot and all that stuff. And he just came and said hello. I said hello, introduced myself. He knew who I was. I knew who he was. We both came from Brooklyn. But I think that the pressure was on him from the jump. And once, like anything else, once people start fighting the direction, it always goes back to the top guy. I think Vince is a genius still. I think he did a lot more for the business, to your point, a lot more positives than people give him credit for. And in this time of social media, I'm sure as he speaks out and does his rants and the things he does when he questions everything, he probably doesn't help people's opinions of that. But working with him, no issues. As a person in and out of the business, no issues. I appreciate his insight, and I appreciate him going, hey, it's yours, run with it. And I think a lot more people would have appreciated that if they would have taken him at face value instead of trying to think of what's he trying to do to me. I was a top guy before he got here. What's he trying to do to me? What's this about? Instead of just taking the opportunities that were put in front of them. But that, again, it's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I like that, when he took over and there was a lot of hype of, now it's the Russo era, or even when they had the New Blood and it was the Russo and Bischoff era. We saw things that were different. We saw people being utilized differently, in a lot of cases better, sometimes not so much. But when I think of it, I think of like when I had gone down, I did some tryouts with WWE, and when it was FCW. Actually just missed you there as a trainer, I think, in the years I've had my tryouts. I'm very thankful for that. But Norman Smiley told the story of Vince Russo. And I remember, I'd see Norman on not even the B-level shows. He'd be on Saturday night once in a while, maybe get on Thunder, doing his thing with the big wiggle. I found him very entertaining. Yes. I like Norman a lot, as he was first presented. And then he told me the story of when Russo came up with the idea for him to be in the hardcore division and to start screaming when he would get beat up. And he said that when that happened, when he was told that, his reaction was, wow, this is the end of my career. First it was, this is the man who invented The Rock and Steve Austin. He's going to come up with a gimmick for me. And then when he heard the idea, he thought it was going to be the worst thing ever, and turned out to be the best thing for his career.
Because for people who didn't know him, as Black Magic in Mexico, I mean, we all knew Norman. We know what he's capable of. Norman, there's another guy, tie you up in knots before you can take two blinks of an eye. His wrestling knowledge in and out of the ring is second to none. And all of a sudden he was given this thing. When he started to scream, it made you want to cry. It was so funny. But after a while, he just owned it. And people just saw him as, this Norman Smiley, the hardcore guy, doing the scream. And one night he's in a hockey uniform, one night he's in a football uniform, one night, and then the big wiggle. Yeah. And you never got him. And I think that's where a lot of guys failed, because a lot of guys thought, this is who I am. This is what I can do. I don't do that. I don't do shtick. And you're taking probably one of the most technical wrestlers ever to put on boots. And he did great shtick. And I think it revitalized his career and made him a household name. Yeah. But yeah, that was a Russo thing. But I think that happened to a lot of guys going, wait a minute. He did all this and now I'm this. Like, it would have been very easy to say, I was in a dungeon, I was this, that, and now you're going to make me General Erection? Like, that night they gave me that promo, I should have walked out of the building. But take the leap. Trust what you're capable of. And because that to me was the thing that Vince said, make it your own. And so Norman's the perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a story that it always stuck with me when he said that, and that, yeah, you know, sometimes you have to trust that they have the right idea, and I think that Russo figured him out. He figured out, you know, this guy's already got a few of the pieces in place. The people react to the wiggle, and you know that he has the charisma to pull this off, and made for some very entertaining TV. I think
Scream was the best.
He was one of the best baby faces at the time in the company. Oh, yeah,
he was great.
Yeah. So now getting back to you, you had that United States Championship run. For me, towards the end, things get a little foggy because I feel like there's this, you drop the title, I'm thinking to Shane Douglas.
Yep.
And then Shane Douglas, I think, would go into a program with Rick Steiner. And then the more I'm thinking about it, I don't even remember there being like a United States Championship match on the last Nitro. So,
no, there wasn't. Yeah.
Okay, so I got all of that right. I guess my memory is really good. But
really good.
Well, thank you. But I remember that. But I remember, okay, they have you drop it to Shane. I think Shane had maybe even made like a return. What was the logic behind that? Just to put it on Shane towards the end, or
if I can remember it right, it was Shane was gonna. There was supposed to be a program with Shane and Steiner.
Okay.
That I don't think happened. But it was that at the end, everybody was grasping at straws, and this guy doing this, and this guy doing this. And I thought Shane and I were going to make a run at it as well. But literally, I have no recall of it because once I was done with Shane, it was like I never did anything with the U.S. title, or I kind of went that way, and the U.S. title thing was gone. And, you know, they were kind of – that's the time when everybody was just – everything was a throwaway. It didn't really matter. But nothing came of that U.S. title thing after that. There was talk when we first got to WWF of bringing it back with Lance and I. And then, you know, as that unfolded, it never came to be. But once I had that one off with Shane, that was it.
Yeah. And it's surprising because I feel they had done such a good job of building you up. One of the top baby faces in the company towards the end. I feel like Rick, they were building the heat behind Rick a lot too. Rick was getting the big heel push now. They had that whole Magnificent Seven thing going on. And, you know, it seemed like you and Rick would have been on a good collision course there for the United States title. Shane comes into the picture. Shane, who had been more or less a heel most of his time there. I think the Revolution kind of made a bit. I don't know if they started off as baby faces and then became heels or what. I feel like it might have been one or the other. But to me, it was odd they were going in that direction when I would have more pictured you and Rick Steiner going there, maybe having a match on the last Nitro.
Yeah, and Rick and I did a lot of live events together. We worked together a whole lot, just not a lot on TV. And then you talking about it, you know, the Revolution, Shane was part of that. But when Big Kev was booking, Kev pulled everybody in the office, and that was the one night where Knobs and I beat Malenko and Saturn, or Malenko and Benoit or something, because they didn't think that we should be losing to them. And I think that was the whole thing. So once Kevin wasn't booking anymore, and whoever took over at the end said, okay, we'll give it back to you now because this guy's not in charge. And I don't know what, because I know there was like Shane heat with this guy and that guy. You know, everybody had heat with somebody and nobody liked this guy. But once the booking control switched to someone else, that's when I dropped the strap to Shane, and then whatever happened from there. Yeah.
And it seemed random, and it just, I could easily believe that, there was a lot of politics involved in that. Yeah. And I don't remember how far off that was from the company actually being sold, and maybe they didn't know it was going to be Vince that was going to pick it up. And, you know, Shane with his heat with the company, doesn't seem like it'd be a logical move. And then, the U.S. title disappears until, if I'm not mistaken, I think they just kind of gifted it to Chris Kanyon. Once the invasion kind of got started. So it's a bit of a blur, but I remember, and you know, at the time, I think actually to my producer here, that was probably when you and I first met, when we were in high school, or you had graduated and I was still in high school here. But just to me at the time, you know, in my last year of high school, watching all that, it didn't make sense as a fan.
Yeah.
So then the invasion happens. Obviously, the last Nitro happens. Were you there for the last Nitro?
Yeah, I got pulled aside by Shane McMahon and Pat Patterson, and Shane asked me to open the show. We want you in the opening dark match. He goes, don't read into it. It's not that we don't want you on TV. There's some things we're going to do tonight. Okay. He said, but kick the show off. He said, we know what you do. Kick the show off. So I went out and had the opening dark match of the night. And lack of I think I did my job and got everybody fired up.
Who'd you work with in that dark match?
I want to say it was Conan and I.
Okay.
Was our last match in WCW. But we had a lot of fun, between the Filthy Animal stuff that had gone on and the Misfits. And so we started to get the people going because they were about to get their minds blown. So we were fortunate enough we were the precursor to all that. But I was grateful for the opportunity to be able to work in front of them. I mean, Pat Patterson, Jerry Briscoe, I think it was Bruce Pritchard and Shane McMahon, not counting all the production people. But when they walked in the room, everybody's heart sank to the floor. But they said, hey, we want you to work tonight. I'm like, you're the boss. I'm going to work.
Wow. Oh, that's great. It's great that you got.
I was grateful because the rest of that show was seat of your pants stuff, so.
Yeah. Yeah, as a fan, as a lifelong WCW fan, it was a hard night. It was hard to watch some of that, not knowing what was going to be next, and knowing that next week you'd put on the channel and the show wouldn't be there. It was it was pretty rough.
We went from there, and then everybody was, for the guys who had heat with Vince and the WWF at the time, they were like, well, oh crap, and then other guys said, I don't care who buys it. I got guaranteed money. And then there was the guys in my circle, my situation. Okay, where do I go now? So I was planning to go back to Japan. That's where I wanted to go. I figured this one was over. I wasn't sure. At the time that we weren't told there was opportunities in WWF for us. And definitely thinking I'm not a top babyface or heel. Who knows if I'm in the picture? So going home, I was making my plans to contact Japan and see what I could do. And then I think 2 days after, I got a phone call from John Laurinaitis and said, they're picking up your contract and they want you to work for them. And I went, whoa, okay, cool.
Yeah, good. And I remember they brought you in. You did that run in. I think you attacked Edge, I want to say.
Edge, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And from there, the invasion got started. They slowly started to filter you guys in. I was kind of surprised with the way they did it because I thought it was going to be, okay, we're going to start this off, fresh matches. It's going to be a pay-per-view, WCW against WWF. But they kind of slowly started to integrate you guys into Raw and starting to have some matches with some people. Yeah. What are your thoughts about how they executed the start of the invasion?
I thought when they kind of laid it out to us, and I think there's a lot of trust issues in the beginning, so they never really gave us the full game plan. But the guys that they had kind of figured in, here's what we're thinking, here's what we're going to do. So it's supposed to be, a series of guys coming in and invading other matches. And then to your point, it was supposed to lead to like a pay-per-view kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're being brought to the TVs and now we're in matches. And don't forget, you still had ECW guys that were still waiting in the wings. So now you have WWF, ECW, and WCW guys. There's 200 cats in the back. And they're going, well, what is okay? Well, let's just put them in things. And storylines don't mean anything. And, we did the first Invasion pay-per-view. And after that, dead in the water. Because people's perception of certain talents and everything, like, these aren't the guys or the girls we need, and we need to get these other guys in. And, before you knew it, here came the older WCW guys that were on top and had the guaranteed money. So they waited out their contracts. Now they came in, and then we got pushed. We got pushed to the back burner again. So,
and I
mean, it's that ebb and flow.
One of the things I remember, and it was weird to me, was when they tried. I think they only tried this once or maybe twice, where they had the WCW commentators, I think they had Scott Hudson and Arn Anderson on commentary. They changed around some of the aprons and the lights and whatever to say this is WCW, and they put on some matches. And I remember, for me, one of the moments that really I didn't like, and I got a lot of hatred about what happened there, but was when they had Kidman and Shane Helms work a match. And so they bring out Kidman, I think it was for the Cruiserweight title, which Shane Helms had. And they bring out Kidman. He has his same song and everything, more or less the same. He's in wrestling gear, but the rest is the same. And they bring out Shane Helms, and it's like he doesn't have his song. He has a new name. Now he's Hurricane Helms. And not for those watching, not Hurricane Helms like the Hurricane when he was the superhero. Right. This was him kind of like his WCW self, but they were calling him Hurricane Helms. And they just kind of stripped him of a lot of the things that made him, a unique character in WCW. Yeah. He was one of my absolute favorites. Like Shane Helms, when he broke away from 3 count and they gave him that push and he was putting on great match. I loved Shane Helms, loved his work. And I was just so disappointed that they brought him in and they changed so much about him, and it just kind of gave me an idea of, okay, well, this is how they're going to treat WCW.
And that's what happened. And as it kept rolling on, and they kept bringing back WCW stars, it kept going that way. So it's
like we could probably do an entire podcast just talking about how they treated certain people. Like we go through a lot. Like, I mean, compare Mike Awesome in WCW to Mike Awesome in the WWF. Yourself in your run in WCW to mostly being on Metal or on Jacked, the pre or Sunday Night Heat, doing that kind of stuff. I just really felt that a lot of guys didn't get a fair shake. In
the same token, though, there were guys that now weren't getting the opportunity on the main show, and weren't getting the opportunity on Heat and Velocity and all these other ones. So, and a lot of people went, well, why do I got to be on Heat every week? Well, shit, if I'm not on Heat or Velocity, I'm not working at all. Yeah. And if you're not working on TV, you weren't going to work live events. So a lot of guys just put it as, well, why am I not getting this? And then a lot of us looked at it was, okay, they're looking at me every week. I still pitch things. I'm still working live events. I'm still earning my keep, and I'm still in front of everyone. So while there was not a lot of opportunities to become, a main player, there were still opportunities, but other guys, there were still 150 guys in the back that weren't getting those opportunities that had been in WWF prior to us being there. So not only did we come in and take over main show spots, we were taking the B show spots too. So, And that's the way I looked at it. So I always looked at it as keep my mouth shut, get me on these shows, and as slowly started to work out for me before going into like all that reality TV, Rikishi and I started to go into a big program. And that's when I knew the progression of paying your dues now in the WWF was starting all over, just like you did in WCW.
Yeah.
For some, a lot of guys, it was who you are. They just put you right there.
Yeah, no, it was definitely something that was evident, at least as someone who had been a fan and followed WCW. When you came back, they reverted you back to Hugh Morrus, if I'm not mistaken. I think you were originally Hugh Morrus when you came back. You weren't General Erection. You were Hugh Morrus when they brought you back. Was that?
Yeah, they brought me in, and the thing was, they told me they were dropping the Hugh Morrus thing. I wasn't sure where they were to go. It wasn't my real name, but they said they were because I went back to saying Hugh Morrus in WCW, even as I was still General Erection, I was Hugh Morrus. But they told me from the beginning that Hugh Morrus wasn't going to work. They wanted to change my gear and everything. And then the very first night, it's Hugh Morrus from WCW. So I did the Hugh Morrus thing for the longest time because people go, why would we change that?
But you mentioned Vince McMahon, and obviously that's been a hot topic here lately. Who would have thought we would see him retire? I never thought I'd see it happen. Many people feel the same way. What are your thoughts on everything that happened here with Vince and his retirement in WWE? I want to ask about your resignation. It's going around in my head, and I just want to know for clarity's sake, were you under any duress to resign, or was this solely your decision, and that's it?
Duress mean like when people knocking on the door. But I always stand by. I got along with my boss, and my boss was Triple H. We had the conversations. I knew what I was there for. I knew what I was brought in for. And I did those things. And when the time came, then you have the option of
maybe not under the best of circumstances, but the passing of your daughter. Again, don't want to bring that up too much, but it's been making some headlines because, if I'm not mistaken, that was due to a drunk driver. It was and with the headlines with Jeff Hardy, your name has come up in a lot of that. What are your thoughts on the Jeff Hardy situation and him being someone that you shared a locker room with? And
it's unfortunate that it was Jeff. I'll put Sonny in that same conversation. Tammy Sitch, who is on trial for DUI manslaughter. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's Jeff Hardy. But people don't follow the whole story. My daughter was taken from us in 2015 by a drunk driver, a multiple DUI offender, so more than one DUI. And so
the character there, I think was great to talk me through that with Tough Enough and getting us to that re-debut of Bill DeMott.
Well, we went in, and the thing that I really dug about joining WWF at the time. And I know I'm not supposed. Well, I don't work for them anymore, so I can say WWF. Someone came to me. We joined. First season of Tough Enough was Taz. The second season was Bob Holly, and then so the third season was coming up, and they came up to me and said, "Hey, we got this show, Tough Enough. We see you out here all the time. Is it something you're interested in?" Sure, I'm interested because.
I mean, I was always rooting for the WCW guys. Whenever they would show up, that was me.
Very cool.
You got the chance to work with The Undertaker, too. I think it might have even been the last match. Possibly your last match on TV?
On TV, it might have been my last match. South, I mean, what people don't know about Deep South was we had no ring, we had no windows, we had no lights. We had people moving from all over the country to start training, and we got up every morning and went to a Gold's Gym and took over their exercise room. And trained on a rug. Wow. I mean, we were finding things to do because they were paying us all to be in Atlanta, but we had no building.
With Deep South.
Watching Miz turn into what he did, watching guys like Matt Stryker, watching Kofi Kingston. I mean, look at Luke Gallows, right? Big Gallows, not Mike, not everybody top to bottom. I think Deep South was the perfect answer to OVW.
What's your version? What's your side of the story with what happened there?
Here's the truth. Here's the version, and it's in my book. I make no there's no bones about it. Every Friday